Good Saturday evening, everybody. Welcome to the West Virginia Postgame Live here on the Mount Air Locker Room Day Now. I'm Greg Chris, and that beside me is Frank Fear. I'm not going to point because I always point the wrong way. Welcome, Frank. It's good to see you again, and a little bit better mood this week than what we had last week.
Yeah, for sure. Although at the beginning, it certainly didn't seem that way, and it's amazing how the game turned around on a what appeared to be an Albany touchdown drive that stalled inside the 5 and then drove all the way down the field, and great touchdown run by Garrett Green, and that was that. This game, we were talking early before the show that there's a lot to be said about parallels in sports, that it's not just a one-off. And this reminded me a lot of the Duquesne game of last year. That final was 56-17. And West Virginia at one point scored 28 points in a row in that game. Score this year almost the same, and West Virginia scored 28 points in a row. But the nice thing is we got a win. We'll talk about the Pitt situation because Pitt came back big time against Cincinnati. Also a parallel to last year with a different outcome, but we got a win.
Yep, that's right. And I thought early in the game, I thought the Mountaineers got their running game going, got that established, which I think opened up the passing game, and they executed the passing game pretty well. And so I thought their execution. And, of course, they're playing a lesser opponent, but their execution was good. The timing was good. All those things that we talked about being bad last week, it seemed like they got those things straightened out. We got a comment there, what a bad game. Well, I thought there were parts of it that were bad. I thought, after we went up 21-0 and then kind of went to sleep there and were sleepwalking for a while, let them back in the game a little bit. That was a little bit of a bad section there, and I just think they just relaxed. I believe they had the big lead, and I felt like they kind of relaxed, thinking it was going to be easy the rest of the way out. Then, boom, when they got hit with 2 scores, they woke up and poured it on after that. So I thought, all in all, I thought it was a pretty good performance. I thought, again, our running game looked 10 times better than it did last week. I know we weren't playing against the same type of defensive line as we did last week, but, that type of game can build some confidence, and again, you get to work on your timing and that sort of thing. And I thought the offensive line performed, pretty well. They protected Green. They blocked well on the run. So I thought it was a pretty good showing as compared to last week. And again, I know it's a different opponent, different game, but it is a little bit of a confidence builder, I think, for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, you're probably the same as I'm on, and our viewers as well, that we're on text strings. And so we get to hear what people are, at least read what people are saying. And let me put Sky the Limit back up. He's elaborating it here. It's and what came out over and over again in the strings I'm in was the defense, and a significant concern about the defense. There's one issue here that I would respond to Sky the Limit. Giving a team 300 plus passing yards is not good. You're absolutely correct. But the landscape has changed. And so you get a team like Albany, not too many years ago, teams like Albany would be essentially populated with players who do not have major college experience. And then they come and they play as well as they can. That's changed now. And you have a number of players at schools like Albany who have come from other schools. That quarterback, for example, transferred from Wisconsin. He was on the Wisconsin roster and then transferred to SUNY Albany for playing time. And the same thing with that wide receiver. I've got to get his name right. Strange first name, Seven McGee. He came from Oregon. And so, they're a football championship team, but they have a lot of players that have come from other schools and many major schools in search of playing time. And they lost their quarterback from last year. They lost him to, I'm trying to remember exactly where he transferred, Miami of Florida. Puffenberger is his name. and they lost him. He would have been the starter. So he loses to go to Miami, Florida, and they get a transfer from Wisconsin to replace him. So the same thing goes on at places like Duquesne. And that's where I think the parallel is there. There's no question about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and these players, you mentioned those guys. Those are good football players. I think the big difference, in an Albany per se and a West Virginia is probably depth. And those teams wear down quicker because they don't have the depth. But when you look at that starting 11 on offense or defense, there's some pretty good football players out there. So, and I don't know, in a game like with Albany, I don't know what their passing attempts were. But I'm sure it was very high because they threw the ball a ton.
Yeah.
And so 300 yards, if you look at the number of attempts and that sort of thing, it may have not been as bad as it seems. However, I think there is a point to be made about the secondary, as I saw it there, that our secondary may need some work. They're struggling a little bit back there and some confusion. Just getting beat sometimes straight up. And one of the things that it just bothers me, it shouldn't, but so much extracurricular stuff with those guys back there.
Yeah.
I saw one, and I'm not going to mention his number or name, but he gave up a 51-yard pass, I think, went right over him. And then he was in on the play that broke up the touchdown pass that they didn't convert on the little out pattern that they just threw up in the air up for grabs. And he jumps up and in the guy's face. And, I'm thinking, you just gave up a 51-yard pass and you're celebrating that. So I kind of, you just kind of get the sense that their minds are not always where they need to be. They're not as focused as they should be. You see a lot of that. And so there is some problems back there. They've got to get rectified. That's for sure.
That's right.
A lot of confusion and that sort of thing. So, but I think those things will straighten themselves out eventually.
Yeah, I think Sky has a lot of good points here.
Yep.
But before I get to that, let me answer your question. They had, as Sky pointed out, 306 yards specifically, 18 for 39, but only 68 yards rushing. So the defensive line really handled their offensive line, but our defensive line still had difficulty getting to the quarterback.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and again, it reinforces Sky's point. I looked at the Duquesne numbers from last year. They had 234 total yards, and this team had 300. Albany had 374. Last year, West Virginia had 620 yards against Duquesne. This year, they had 553. So, I think we've got some points here that I think that are very defensible. And that Pitt, I agree with that Pitt and Cincinnati game. Last year, Cincinnati went into Pitt and beat Pitt. And I've got the numbers here because it's just amazing to me when you look at it. I got it here. Last year it was 27-21. 27-21. I'm having a little problems with my computer here. Let me do this before we run into trouble. Sorry about that. There we go. So last year it was the Pitt score was 27-21, Cincinnati beating Pitt. But what the problem for Pitt that we saw was Jerkovic was their quarterback. He was 10 for 32 against Cincinnati. Pitt tried to come back. They outscored them 27-7. Cincinnati was way ahead. This year it just flipped, and Pitt went to Cincinnati and won that game. Boy, I'll tell you, it's interesting. But at least that sets up the Pitt West Virginia game, which we'll talk more about later. Hey, Mike is here. Good to see you.
Hey, Mike.
Good to see Frank. Greg.
How you doing, Mike?
I'm here, buddy. I I apologize. I wasn't able to watch the game tonight.
Oh,
I couldn't find it. I looked all over for it. And I talked to Frank about it. I said, I'm just going to pass, but he said he liked my insight, so here I am.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think you got your TV on a bit there, Mike. Is that what you got there? Better turn that down a bit.
Sorry about that. I'm watching Alabama.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are in the same boat, Mike, because, well, think about last night's NFL game. If you're not a Peacock subscriber, you couldn't watch it. So
I didn't see it.
yeah, so tonight it's ESPN Plus. We're just going to see more of that. That's just the way it's going to be.
And I hate that. I'm sure everybody does, but what do you do?
Yeah, not much you can do about it. That's what's coming. And I mean, I have ESPN Plus because I have somebody's login. That's the only reason I have. I don't know who's it is, but that's what I have. So I'm able to watch those games. But yeah, it's coming to the point, like you said, the streaming services. And I didn't see last night either. I'd forgotten there was a pro game, as a matter of fact, till today, and I saw a little clip about it, and I was like, oh, yeah, they did play last night. But, yeah, that's what it's coming to. So Dave Brown there. First WVU game he's watched in a few years. We're good.
Yeah, if you're going to be a hunter, hunting bourbon ain't bad, I'll tell you. So,
that's right.
Yeah, good. I think Dave was on the pregame show. That was a really vibrant pregame show.
Okay.
And pretty sure Dave was on that. So, welcome, Dave. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the question. I think the $64,000 question is, did we really learn anything today in relationship to what happened last week? And talk about parallels. We saw it again today and we talked about the schedule on Wednesday, opening schedules, and so many teams had big first games. Notre Dame goes down to Texas A&M. Focus. Will they beat Texas A&M? Which is also asking the question, is Notre Dame back? So they go to College Station and they win. They go home against Northern Illinois. Easy game. What happens? Notre Dame loses. Penn State goes up. Easy game against Bowling Green. And what happens? They were down at the half.
Yep.
And we were talking before the show, that the Penn State quarterback did not look good at all. Drew Aller did not look good. And I think the numbers I have are accurate, 13 for 20 for 204 yards. Harrison Wallace, who just decimated us, did not play today. But he was replaced by Tyler Warren, who had a good game. But it was 24-20 at half. Penn State came back, outscored BG in the second half 14-3, and they won. But I also was telling Greg before the show, that quarterback for Bowling Green, Connor Bazelak, this guy has been playing college football since 2019, and he's thrown for over 9,000 yards. And he's played at Mizzou. He played at Indiana University. And so, again, it goes back to what I was saying. Sometimes when you look at these teams and say, well, these are guys who couldn't make it at the big schools, the power schools, so that's why they're there. So many of these players are transferring. So to get playing time.
Yeah,
they want the opportunity. Yeah.
And Frank, as well as I do, there used to be a saying, even in West Virginia, we will play the best 11, not the 11 best.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variables in there. The guy on the second team or the third team at a Power 4 conference is unhappy. He transfers to a smaller school, and now he's right where he wants to be with his hand on the ground and making up for that time and showing his skills. And it happens all the time. In my thoughts, thinking about today's game, as an athlete and coach, see if I'm right about this. When you're an athlete or a team and you play a school, and let's talk about, like, say, Penn State, the outcome is in doubt from the beginning. Now, as you as an athlete can accept that challenge, or you can accept the fact that you're facing a big team we'll go out here and try not to get hurt.
Mhm.
On the other hand, you play a team today in Albany, which you're expected to beat, 28-point favorites, and you have that little skip in your step. You have tonight, I'm going to score 20. Tonight, I'm going to rush for 150. Do you think I'm right about that, Greg? That the mentality part plays
Oh,
a
yeah.
key?
Yeah. I think the mentality, the psychology of all of it does play a big role in it. And, you know, I mean, you're a human. And, you know, I know as a coach, I never would say it, but there were games when I felt like, well, maybe we can work on this a little bit because we don't have to worry about winning the game. You know, we know we're going to win it. So, you know, there's that mentality a lot of times, and you can preach all you want, but in the end, these Mountaineer players, they know we're playing Albany. I don't care what you say to them.
That's right.
You know, they know that. And I think sometimes that does create some issues. And, you know, some of these upsets that you see like this, that's got to be a part of it. And I'm sure Notre Dame players, again, these are young people. They thought this was going to be a cakewalk. And totally mentally unprepared, I'm sure. Physically, I'm sure they were fine just because they're better players. But the mental part of it was missing bad.
Yeah, and they woke up in the second half just like they did against Duquesne last year. And both Sky and Dave have said of this. And again, the stats speak to it. Okay, this Miles Burkett, who is the quarterback for Albany. Okay, he's a transfer from Wisconsin. He didn't play much there, but he played in a major program. In the first half alone, he was 10 for 20, 176 yards, and hit 5 receivers. And so this goes back to the secondary. And again, you guys may have had it, may have heard it, but on the text streams I'm on, people were saying it's the secondary, it's the secondary, it's the secondary. Concern about the free safety, making some bad choices. But, you know, here they came in. And again, this is a big game for Albany. Just the reverse of what Greg's saying. We're saying it's Albany, and they're saying this is West Virginia. Biggest crowd we're going to play before, probably in our careers. And he goes 50% for 176 and hits 5 receivers. And one of those was this Jakari Carter, who had a TD. He's a transfer from Georgia State. Again, so you've got this. We have more recycled players than we've ever had before, and I see that our friend Mark Parsons is here and says Pitt will be a battle next week. And I'll tell you, Mark, one of the reasons it's going to be a battle is that this Eli Holstein, who replaced Jerkovic, is a gamer. He was 20 for 35 today for 302 yards and 3 TDs and led that comeback at Cincinnati. So he's mobile and he's smart, and it's going to put even more pressure on it will put continuing pressure on that secondary.
Yeah, you know, I think you talk about our defensive line, who seemed to play a little bit better, really played well against the run today, but we're still not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I know we had a sack or two today, but you know, that can create a lot of problems for the secondary. If that defensive line is not doing their jobs and giving the quarterback way too much time, I mean, it's hard for anybody to cover somebody for 4, 5, 6 seconds out there on an island by themselves. It's hard to do. So I don't think we can place all the blame on the secondary. Though I do think there are some problems back there. We got to get more pressure up front.
That's right.
Help those guys out. And I mean, I know there's some problems back there. I agree. But at the same time, I don't think it all falls on their shoulders because, you know, your defensive line has to do their job. You know,
Right.
Got to get pressure on the guy.
And you know, Frank, too, Greg, the complexity of the secondary, we don't know. You know, right? You know, they make calls on the run. They make audibles without even speaking that we don't know about. And I tend to go back to that because, you know, it just takes that much of a missed communication to have a guy running open down the middle.
Yeah, and you also see, I think about this play. It was a mental mistake, obviously, but this is a good example. It was a short play, but still a good example. Albany had the ball down on the goal line, and they ran a little play action. They faked a handoff and tried to hit the tight end, who delayed and then went across the goal line. It was wide open. The defender for West Virginia rushed and then realized he had the tight end. He was responsible for that. He was fortunate enough to get up and block the pass, but the guy was wide open, and that was a mental mistake. He made a mental mistake. He was going to go get the quarterback. Then he realized the tight end was his, so he tried to stop and go back. Tight end was wide open, and when he threw the pass, he was able to deflect it and saved his skin there. But that was a mental mistake right there, and that's the kind of things that are happening back there with them. Is like you said, they're I don't know. It seems like sometimes when they do call these audibles or call their play, one person don't get it. One person screws it up, and that leaves somebody out there by themselves trying to cover a wide receiver, and they struggle with that. And but I still think the defensive line adds some pressure. Then your defensive backs will look a lot better.
Yeah. And I was just go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank. I was just going to say, you remember when Denny was on, Denny Brown, he talked about in those big games bringing everybody, sick them. And they only had 2 seconds to throw the ball.
Right.
And so, I could have covered some of them guys for 2 seconds. So not really, but you know what I mean? So that also the schemes involved, as we all know. And let's face it, too, some of those guys, you talk about Albany, but with the portal and with the transfers, they're not the former FBS athletes.
Right.
They're now, like Frank was mentioning, the quarterback. These are guys that came from big programs that were coached up on a high level. So, they're no slouches.
Nope.
That's right. And I was just looking again to be fair about this. I'm looking at total tackles for tonight, according to ESPN, and Anthony Wilson Jr., who's a free safety, had 6, and that was the most on the team. Cutter and Lathan had 5 apiece. Carrico 4, and Jaheim Joseph, also a defensive back, had 4. So, but I agree with Mark. It's Pitt's going to be a struggle, not a struggle, but a challenge at the very least, because they're coming into the game 2-0, which they weren't last year because they lost to Cincinnati. So it'll be it's an important game for West Virginia, and probably certainly more telling than tonight's game, and will tell you what we may have, because we turn around and come back home and play Kansas the following week, and that's critical. And you look at Baylor today, and what that team must be thinking right now, going up to Salt Lake and playing Utah and just getting absolutely they were beaten badly by Utah. And West Virginia really has to focus on that first game against the Jayhawks and can't afford to have a repeat of the game several years ago that was in the bag for West Virginia until it wasn't. And then we lost the game in overtime. So that's going to be a very important game, obviously.
Yep, I think so too. That it's one of those types of games where it's situated in our schedule that could make or break your season. If you win it and then going next week, start your conference play with a little bit of confidence and a good solid win behind you. You got some momentum. Things will be better. If you lose that game, and it's going to be tough because it is a big rivalry game again. Tough to bounce back from, when you've got good teams coming at you week after week after week. It's hard to play anyway. But if you're looking at going in after a loss to a Pitt, which would again, big rivalry game, I think would weigh heavy on us. And so I think it's an extremely important game for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, Mike, it's a program game. It's I don't even know if it's a season game. Just to expand on what Greg said, with the high expectations this year, 1-1 now. If you play out the worst case scenario and the Mountaineers lose next week and then to Kansas at home, You've lost. You lost against your big rival. You've lost your first Big 12 game, and then the question is, then you've got an off week, right? Um, so before you go to Oklahoma State, I was shocked. If you saw that score, I thought they were certainly going to lose the game at home against Arkansas. But that team is like the Kansas City Chiefs. They just figure out a way to win it,
Yep.
and Ollie Gordon did at the end, and they won the game. So it's a tough road ahead. On the other hand, to be positive, there's great opportunity here. Take them one at a time, and the next step is to go up to Pittsburgh, win that game, and the question marks that we have now, there needs to be answers. That defensive line needs to put more pressure on the quarterback, especially a good quarterback who's mobile, and the secondary has to be able to play much better. The offense today, I think, that was a question mark because we just didn't seem to be in sync last week. Made a lot of as Coach Brown said, mental errors. And today, the running game was going. Donaldson was back. White was back. The injury that we thought might be more serious doesn't seem to be at all. And the only question was the strength of the tight ends, although Cole Taylor had a good game, a better game, because he didn't have a good game really against Penn State. But that Pitt game is not only a season game, a big game, a rival game, but I think it's very much a program game. What your thoughts, guys?
Well, if I may, Greg,
Yep.
The days of 4-0 starting the season are gone. When you played, Poca High School and St. Elmo's Junior College to start the season, they're gone. We saw that today with the big opening games, to where the first matchup of the season was the third or fourth game, right?
Yep.
So now you're right, Frank. It's a program game, as are a lot of them, because you're looking at starting the difference between 3-1 or 1-3.
Mm-hmm.
1-3. Now you're rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
You might try to catch up and get in a bowl game, but now you really got to think about things. 3-1, your path is on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
You continue to improve. You continue your overall program game plan. Continue what you're doing. So I think that's the big difference. Not to belay any of these schools, but West Virginia used to open up with a MAC school, 55-3.
Yeah.
Followed up by another mid-major or a major that was down on its luck, 42-6.
Yeah.
And before they ever got into the meat of the schedule, and it wasn't just them. Nebraska did it. Alabama, everybody did it. And so I just think those days are gone now.
They really are. They really are. And the thing about it is, we've talked about this, guys. Everybody has predictions. Everybody wants to be a hero and say, I predict. And, the old bromide is it's played on the field. Here are the scores, Big 12 scores. Okay, Kansas, Illinois. Illinois is ahead of Kansas by 3, 20-17, 6 minutes left. Nebraska, Colorado. Nebraska 28, Colorado 3. This one, Oklahoma against Houston, easy peasy. Oklahoma 14, Houston 12, with 10 minutes left in the third. Okay? We know Kansas State had a hell of a time with Tulane and probably should have lost, and they won that game. Iowa State beat Iowa. But when you think about those scores, Illinois being ahead of Kansas with that great quarterback, Nebraska is just all over Colorado, given all the problems Nebraska has had, all the hype that Colorado has had. And Houston has the ball at their own 8 with 10 minutes left in the third, only down by 2 against Oklahoma on the road.
Yeah, it's in today's game, you just can't you can't take anything for granted. I don't think you can't take any of these teams for granted. Like we've been saying all along, they've got good players. They're college players, and a lot of these guys transfer into these places to get a play, and they're good players. They're good enough to make teams at big schools, and they're they come in and they're good. Of course, I always say early in the season like this, I always laugh when I hear them talking about big upsets. They talked about Georgia Tech being a big upset over Florida State. And I'm like, the only reason it's an upset is because you guys on ESPN said Florida State was the number 7 ranked team in the country, or whatever the case is. So it wasn't really an upset. They lost the very next week, and so they're not saying these are upsets now. It's that Florida State's not very good. So you look at a lot of these games and you think, is that really an upset or is it not? Now, take Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame. I feel like that's an upset any year. That's an upset. Appalachian State used to always beat somebody, Michigan or whoever. I never considered those upsets because Appalachian State did that every year. And, I don't know that these teams are always, ranked. And that's why I've said for years that these rankings should not be allowed to come out before these teams play at least 4 games.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it because, again, you get teams ranked up high and these power teams, the Blue Bloods, they lose a game and they drop 5 spots, then they have a chance to crawl back up into the action. A team like West Virginia, they lost their first game. They're nowhere to be found in the top 25 and won't be until they win 3, 4, 5 games in a row. So it's harder for them to make that climb than it is one of these Blue Bloods. And these early season upsets, I think, are going to become more normal. I don't think it's going to be as unusual as it used to be because the quality of player at some of these places is better, and they always want to rank the same teams high, and they're not always that good. Notre Dame, how good are they? They looked awful good against Texas A&M going into that hornet's nest they went into and won. And my thought was, my gosh, these guys are daggone good, Then they turn around and lose to Northern Illinois. So, are they really that good, or they just stubbed their toe this week? I watched Penn State today. Penn State didn't look like the same team that we played. I mean, when I saw them against us, I felt like they could possibly be one of the better teams in the country. If there's too many better, I'd like to see them. Georgia, not included, but you just don't know until they played 3 or 4 games, how good they really are. And this second week, I think is pretty telling on a lot of them. Next week it'll be more so, and it'll start to shake out the way it should. But yeah, I think you're going to see more and more of this at the beginning of seasons. These teams, get knocked off early for a couple of reasons. One, they may not be that good, or they take people way too lightly. And speaking of Appalachian State, as I see their score, they got beat 56-13 by Clemson. So there's my point.
Yeah, and I was one that thought that App State would win that game. But again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, guys, that was a program game for Clemson. If given what happened to them last week, if they had lost to App State at home, then the question is, boy, oh boy, that it doesn't look like Clemson is back in the picture. Right. So that helps. That gives them some time at least, because App State can never be. I mean, when you look at year after year, not only the big win at Michigan, but boy, they gave North Carolina State a lot of trouble in recent years, and should have won games that they lost against those teams. I'm thinking about the North Carolina game last year that North Carolina, I think, won in overtime, multiple overtime, was lucky to win. But you're right. And so, but, there's just too much hype going on, too much expectations. And, the point you make, I think, is good, Mike. But one thing I would say, one thing has not changed. Even though you're right, these MAC teams, for example, like Bowling Green, can't be taken lightly. Obviously, Northern Illinois can't be taken lightly either. Akron did very well at Ohio State last week, but they have major college level players on the team. But as a program, it's not a power profile. That hasn't changed. And so, but I think what we're seeing is a couple of players on these football championship teams, group of 5 teams, can make an absolutely huge difference, just like it can in a basketball court. And so we're seeing that, particularly the skill players. But next week we don't have to worry about that because Pitt's a power team, and
Right.
they've got players that fit the power profile.
Too, if I want to expound on something, if I could, about what Greg was saying about the hype, and we have a thing that for years and years was taboo to talk about, and that's the point spread. And so when we talk about a school being a favorite, that's one of the indicators that somebody somewhere has said this school is 21 points better than this school. Am I right? And we don't know that or not. Why? How can you say that when you've not seen them play?
Yeah.
So Greg's right. Wait till 3 or 4 games, then bring out the poll. But we know it's all about money.
Yep.
We know that it's all about to be able to say on TV that we have number 2 versus number 9, things like that, because it wouldn't be as sexy to say, here's Team A and here's Team B. I mean, it's as plain as it is. But yeah, I agree. Because some guy on ESPN says you're now number 1 or number 5, and that just don't make it right, as we found out and we all know.
It used to be guys that they would ESPN and Fox would just show the numbers, -5, +5. They're in the business. You've got ESPN Bet, so it's not. It's like in the old days, Paramount would produce the film and Amazon would buy it and then show it. Now Amazon's producing its own films. So what you have is your point is really a good one, Mike, is that these point spreads are the influence, but now we've got the interlocking of the media and also the same media company operating its own betting operation. Fox does it, ESPN does it.
And that should be a conflict of interest, in my opinion, but it's too late now. We'll never see it go away.
Nope. No, and like I said, it's so unfair, to teams like West Virginia, even Virginia Tech, any of these teams, that don't have any ranking at the beginning of the season. They lose a game and they're even further down, and they win, have to win the next 5 or 6 to even crack the top 25. And you've got a Notre Dame, for example, loses this week. They were ranked 5th, I think. They'll drop down to 10, 11, maybe if that's far. They win a couple games, they'll be right back up there at 5th again. And so they don't have to climb back in per se. They're there. And, it is all money driven. And it's about the lines and money lines and that sort of thing. And, these ESPNs and Fox Sports and all those, like Frank said, they're shoveling out the cash, and they're dabbling in the gambling part of it. And I don't have a problem with the gambling on it and all that. That's fine. But I think it makes it unfair to a lot of teams because of the hype that they give certain teams and, the number of times they put them on primetime TV just to show. It's unfair to other teams, this conflict that's going on. And it is a conflict, I think. I mean, you're trying to make money off of gambling for the 2 best teams in the country, and you're going to rank who you got on Saturday night in this game. You're going to make sure that they're as high as ranked as you can possibly push them up. And like I said, this makes it unfair for the smaller guys in the pool, like West Virginia. And to correct my score there, that 56-13, that's halftime.
Ouch.
Wow. Well,
What you say.
well, you think about that Clemson locker room,
Oh, yeah.
a team that had won the national championship, and how embarrassed they were, or how they really got hit hard last week. So you got who are we? I mean, it really comes down to the question of who are we, and I'm sure Penn State's asking that question because that just wasn't supposed to be down at halftime. And the same thing at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's asking the same thing, and now we've got a big question mark at Colorado, bigger than we had before. Because if you saw the game last week. North Dakota State is another football championship level school. They're a good team. They won a national championship multiple times at that level. South Dakota State's another great team. But boy, the game ended when they were on the 4-yard line they would have gone in and beaten Colorado. And now I'm going to double check what this score is.
I think it's 28-3, I believe.
It's still 28-3 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And Illinois is still beating Kansas 20-17 with 2 minutes left in the fourth. They're in the 2-minute warning. And Illinois has the ball at the KU 21.
Wow.
So this is going to be a huge upset. One of the teams that was favored. It's exciting, but what it says is, again, we've said this over and over again, all these predictions, the things are supposed to line up a certain way. The real world has a way of teaching us.
Yeah,
I agree.
You think about if you're a player on a team that's 30-point underdogs. You're gonna pull them pants up a little bit tighter, get you a new mouthpiece, and try to prove that they were wrong. Even if it's only by 10 points, you want to prove that they were wrong, that you were not that team that was that such an underdog. That's just my opinion. If you got a bunch of guys out there competitors, and they probably have been all their life through many sports, and they're just with that said, there are overmatched teams.
That's right.
But
you're absolutely correct.
But as a whole, like we was talking about earlier, as an athlete, you're not going to be sitting in that locker room thinking about you're already, when you step on the field, you're already behind 30-0.
That's right.
You're just not going to do it. And so that's motivation.
No, you're right. This point that Russell has is really a good one, and it links to all the comments are good, but this one links a lot, I think, to what Neil Brown said last week, and that is that he made an interesting point. A lot of the mistakes made against Penn State, he referred to as his words, not mine, quote unquote, non-talent related mistakes. And what was happening, there were large gaps in the middle of the field that allowed Aller to run. And that was largely mental mistakes being made by the linebackers and particularly the secondary. And Russell's right. A lot of yards today. And again, a good quarterback, even though he doesn't have a lot of experience with Albany, he's just taken over. This was only his second game, and he didn't have a particularly good game last week against Long Island. But that pass coverage, we thought had been fixed, but Beanie Bishop played a hell of a 2023. There's still question marks there, and one of the guys that we're not hearing a lot of is we thought had high hopes for is Aiden Garnes, who was on the other side of the field last year against Duquesne, a cornerback. And I don't have to look at his stats, but he has to step up. There's absolutely no question. And talking about Long Island, they're playing TCU tonight. They're getting beaten 38-0. That was a team that gave Albany a close game. last week. I think less than a touchdown.
I don't know if you, well, I know Mike didn't, but I don't know if Frank, if you noticed too, that it seems like Neil Brown's playing a lot of different defensive backs. I saw a lot of different teams out there today.
He did.
And I'm just wondering if they're just searching for that person that might step up and be the next Beanie. And but I noticed today that a lot of substitution in that defensive backfield, and I even saw the wide receiver Gallagher playing in the defensive backfield.
That's right. He has been.
Yep, offensive, defense, both. So
yeah,
I'm really searching, trying to find, something solid that they can put back there, and which is scary when you're going after.
He had 3 receptions, Greg, and 1 tackle.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for I'm looking at this long list of secondary players that he used. Aiden Garnes had 2 tackles, both solo. Aubrey Burks, 3 tackles, 2 solos, and we're not hearing his name as much as I thought we would. But Cutter's everything we thought he was going to be. Trey Lathan is, we already know him, and Carrico, the Ohio State transfer, looks to be really solid. Now here's a name I had not heard much, and it's the Caden Beiser. He stepped up and had 4 tackles, 3 which were assisted tonight. Ty French, 3 tackles, 2 solo. And another name we haven't heard as much as I thought we would is Sean Martin. Sean Martin only had 2 tackles tonight. And I don't know the health of Edward Visterani. I really thought that he and Martin not only would be the anchors of that defensive line, but we'd hear their names a lot. Am I missing something? Have you guys heard those names more?
No, I haven't. I noticed today, as a matter of fact, when he got his second tackle, I didn't even realize he had a different number. He's wearing number 5 for some reason.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't even seen him. And I kept thinking he must have changed numbers because I think he was 91 last year. And I hadn't seen him, but I saw him today when he made his second tackle. And he had number 5 on. I said, maybe that's why I'm not seeing him as much as I thought I should, is that he's got a different number. But apparently that's not the case. He's just not hadn't produced a whole lot so far. And, you would think. I think I heard him say today the stat on him was he hadn't missed a game at all in his career since he's been there. He hadn't missed one single game. And so you expect a little more out of him.
That's right.
And I'll say this too. Another thing I thought when I saw him was that he looked smaller than he used to be. It looks to me like he's lost weight, and I don't know.
Yeah.
He didn't look as big as he did last year. That might be me and might be the number. I don't know, but it seemed that way to me.
That's right. Hey, on an update, Illinois got a field goal. They're now leading Kansas 23-17 with 40 seconds left. KU has the ball at their own 30. And so that's going to reposition things, not only in the Big Ten, but again, surprises. Michigan State went to Maryland today and with a new coach and a new quarterback, and they won at the last second with the field goal. And so Penn State not playing very well. I didn't check to see how Ohio State was doing because we were watching the West Virginia game. But 49-0 over Western Michigan. Western Michigan gave Wisconsin everything they wanted last week. And you look at Texas go marching into Ann Arbor and just, boy, they owned Michigan at the Big House today, 31-12. Yeah. Iowa losing. That's interesting.
Yep. Iowa State and Ohio State kind of flipped it reversed the field. They didn't play that well last week and struggled in their game last week. This week, you thought they might struggle a little bit, but they took care of business this week. So, they kind of different route. But, and again, I still say it takes 3-4 weeks before we really know.
That's right.
Before we really know. And, Alabama's struggling with South Florida right now. And, so you don't know from year to year. And new coaches, different players. And, it's like Michigan. Michigan's going to struggle. They lost a ton of players last year.
Yeah.
That's no surprise.
That's right. Georgia Tech came down to earth today, lost at Syracuse. And so, I think the more I look at it, I'm looking at the box score again for the Pittsburgh Cincinnati, and I think this Eli Holstein at quarterback, 20 for 35 for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Desmond Reed is a really good running back. He was 20 carries for 148 yards, 8-yard average. And Holstein ran for 36. As I mentioned, he's mobile. And then as receivers, he had 2 100-yard receivers today. Mumpfield had 5 for 123. And Desmond Reed, again, out of the backfield, had 6 for 106. And so this is going to be a really big test for West Virginia. And all the issues that we talked about in terms of their defense, their secondary in particular, but also the linebackers and the line, they got to put pressure on them. The linebackers have to cover the middle of the field. And, a couple of those long passes by Albany, particularly in that third quarter, that 40-yard pass when it was 3rd and something, that was a beautiful pass, but he was open. And it's sort of scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when you see those big chunk plays coming like that, you just wonder, what the heck's going on. Like Mike said, some of the calls are complicated back there. You just wonder if everybody's on the same page. A lot of times it don't look like they are. I don't know if it's necessarily a talent thing, because the guys seem to be talented and fast and hit hard and all that. So you don't know if it's a talent thing or just maybe a scheme thing where they're not going to the right places. I don't know what it is. It just seems like people get wide open, and that's a breakdown back there somewhere with communication or whatever the play call was, and somebody goes to the wrong spot. And you see them fussing back and forth at each other. That's an indicator too that somebody screwed up and went the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta get those things figured out. And like I said, it's gonna be a test this weekend.
And one thing we've not touched on, Craig, and you were a high school basketball coach. You had 12, 14 guys you had to worry about all the time?
Yep, that's it.
Now you're talking about a college football team where now Neil Bryan has 110 guys that have 110 girlfriends, that have 110 moms. It's
cell phones.
You might not think about that, but those guys, the 110 guys going to class, that adds up. And to get all on the same page on Saturday afternoon is just it's just amazing.
Yep, that was a miracle they got done what they do get done.
Kansas was on the Illinois 46, tried a Hail Mary, it failed. Illinois wins 23-17. And that's probably going to catapult Illinois probably into the top 25. And again, both the Big 12 and the Big 10 aren't even early. It's not shaping up the way a lot of people thought. That was a big win for Iowa State in Iowa today to come. And of course, there's the West Virginia connection there at quarterback with Anthony Beck's son, Rocco, at quarterback. And, interesting, the link there, not only is West Virginia, but we were talking earlier about gambling. The Iowa State quarterback was caught in a gambling sting by the state officials, the state police, and was removed from the team. And Rocco Beck, who was a freshman at the time, got the start because of that. And boy, he's made the most of it and
Yes,
has
he
played
has.
now. Yeah, he's done a great job.
Yep,
Well, I see
sure has.
we've been on for about an hour, guys.
Yep.
Any final comments, and we'll take it home here.
Yep. Let's go get Pitt. Big week, and so we'll be pre-programming that one Wednesday night. We'll be talking about that a little bit with a nice special guest. I think everybody will enjoy, and I assume we're allowed to say it on here, Frank, on this show.
Oh yeah,
We'll be having Bill McKenzie on with us, who
there he is.
unforgettable. If you ever watch the replay of it and hear Jack Fleming saying Bill McKenzie kicks a 38-yard field goal,
Yeah.
last play of the game, and beat Pitt. So
Yeah.
we're going to do that before the Pitt game. So maybe some of the guys will watch it and get fired up. Maybe, who knows?
Well, yeah, and it's you think about every school has them a list of maybe the top 5 or 10 plays
Yep.
of all time, and we all remember the Major Harris run against Penn State in '88, and we had Pat Randolph on the other night, that 21-yard run, I think it was, against Penn State in '84. Bill McKenzie's kick in '75 at the buzzer to beat Pitt at Old Mountaineer Field ranks right up there. So we're just pleased to have him. Any final comments, Mike?
Well, like I told you, Fred, I missed the game. Wasn't able to get it, so I can't really comment on the game. But as far as the psyche of the team, without being there, I think this game would help them tremendously. It'll give them some confidence. It'll maybe hopefully the scheming part they've corrected their mistakes, tweaked things. Again, they didn't open with a cupcake, as they used to call them, where they could have tweaked things and could have made mistakes and not cost them. So hopefully now they'll get into it and continue to improve, and the fans will continue to stay with them.
Yeah, that's important.
And stay with Neil Brown. I guarantee he's working as hard as he can.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, you're right. Fans have to stick with him. And just mention your 2 on the network, Voice of College Football. We're on Wednesday during the week, one time at 7 o'clock. Hope you join us. But Mark Rogers, who's the executive producer of the network, is on every single weekday, Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern on the College Football Show. And you can watch it via YouTube at the Voice of College Football. So, guys, always a pleasure working with you, and enjoyed your comments. I'm a little bit smarter than I was before I turned on the machine tonight. So thank you so much. And for all of you watching, both live and also in the video vault, we appreciate it. It's Frank Fear for Greg Christ and Mike Dunlap, and we hope to see you next time.
Good night,
Thanks, guys.
everybody.